Hello everyone, it's me Clayton. I just finished watching If, directed and written by John Krasinski and starring Kaylee Fleming, Ryan Reynolds, and featuring tons of celebrity voices from Awkwafina to Amy Schumer to Phoebe Waller-Bridge to Steve Carell to Bradley Cooper to a bunch of other people. Now, If comes from the mind of John Krasinski, who happens to be a father with two daughters himself. So him creating essentially a live-action Pixar film doesn't seem like it's outside of the realm of possibility. But with an unfocused plot and sometimes an imaginary friend system that feels a bit too complicated for its own good, this does feel like it has some flaws. But if a film manages to get me emotionally invested twice in the ending, it clearly did something correctly. But let's get to the story, shall we? Kaylee Fleming plays Bee. She's a little girl who was raised by a loving mother and father, the father played by John Krasinski, and after her father needs surgery at a hospital, she has to live with her grandmother, where she ultimately finds that she can see various imaginary friends. And another person who can see imaginary friends is her neighbor named Calvin, played by Ryan Reynolds. So, when Bee finds out that she can see imaginary friends and she can see that they want to either reconnect with their past owners or to get new kids to connect to so they don't disappear, Bee and Calvin decide to work together to ultimately find the home of these imaginary friends and to help them, live with their previous kids or to find new ones. So that's all I'll say about the story. The story here sounds fairly simple when it comes to, on the surface, a live-action Pixar movie plot. But when it comes down to how the imaginary friends work, I think it could be a little too complicated for some kids to get into. For example, the rules with imaginary friends are that they have to glow a certain way when they're near either their previous owner or a kid who generally enjoys said imaginary friends. But some kids can't really see the imaginary friends that well. There are plenty that can't. And when it comes to the imaginary friend, they have to find one that's applicable for a specific person, or new ones can be created based on how the kid is. Not all the rules are really explained that well, and while it can lead to some funny jokes and some interesting visuals here and there, it does feel like the system with the imaginary friends isn't as fleshed out as you'd think it would be. It feels like the kids are supposed to connect the dots themselves, and I felt like they should have gone all the way with that, or they could just have a clear explanation for everything. On top of that, the plot feels like it's partially about Bee wondering whether she should grow up and forget the times she had with her own imaginary friend, and how much she should grow up and how much she should stay a kid, and how much is helping these other imaginary friends be helping out with their problems. It feels like the film doesn't give both storylines an equal amount of time. It feels like it spends a lot of time with the imaginary friends, but not as much with Kaylee and her father. That almost feels like an afterthought for the majority of the film. That is until we get to the last 15 minutes. I'm not going to spoil them for you, but I actually genuinely got an emotional response from myself and the rest of the audience when we got to the last 15 minutes, and clearly I wouldn't have felt that way if I didn't care about Bee or Calvin or the other characters. Clearly, the movie is doing something right if it's able to provoke a decent response like that on me. You could say it's mainly because of the overly whimsical and sentimental music that's used throughout the majority of the film. It does feel kind of heavy-handed every now and then, but at the ending it really worked. Especially because the performances are quite strong throughout. While this feels like kind of a half-baked idea at times, there clearly are other times where the idea does work, even for a cynical adult like myself. So, while I don't think it's a film that's going to work for everybody, I do think it's a film that families will probably love. So that's why I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. See you next time.